Ways and means, what a day we have had. We are going to pick up a bill with the number
H230.
H230. Right now at 3:37. And that's the last thing we'll do today. And Michael O'Grady has kindly joined us to tell us about it. The floor is yours, Michael.
Good afternoon. This is Mike O'Grady with Legislative Council. Do you want me to walk through all of the bill or just the fiscal?
I would love for you to tell us big picture what the bill is about and then just look at the sections related to money, please.
So this bill makes multiple, I would call them miscellaneous amendments to fish and wildlife law. Some of which have a fiscal implication, but most of them don't. And they're related to just honestly effective management of the fish and wildlife of the state. And that's really just a general overview of what it is.
Success.
Okay. So the first section authorizes the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife to designate Labor Day as the free mentored fishing weekend. And a mentored fishing license means someone without a license can go out with someone who has a license to learn how to fish without having to pay that fee. So it would be free. And that's all Sec 1 does. Sec 2 does have a fiscal impact. It's about fishing tournaments. It clarifies that the tournaments held on the Connecticut River are not subject to the fee because they're not in Vermont. And then it shifts the fees for the tournament from just kind of a one set fee for each permit to a fee based on the number of participants. So a tournament with 25 participants pays $10. Tournament of 26 to 50, 30. Tournaments with more than 50 pays. The next section changes the fines for big game violations. I'm sure James is going to tell you that fines, Fish and Wildlife fines, go into the Fish and Wildlife Trust Fund. So.
And somewhat bizarrely, fines are actually not in our jurisdiction.
Okay. All right. Moving on. It defines what a big game violation is for the purposes of
They're not
this
designed to.
section. Do you want to know what a big game violation is?
I would love to know what a big game violation.
Yes.
I
It's-
did hear a rumor that sometimes hitting a deer with your car is a big game violation.
It's taking, possessing, transporting, buying, or selling big game. Big game is deer, moose, turkey, anadromous salmon, bear, and I think that's it. The violations, it also is a threatened and endangered species violation. It's also when you are hunting or trying to hunt when you are under criminal suspension of your license. It is also the trade in covered animal parts. It's also when someone intentionally interferes with hunting, fishing, or trapping. It's also the illegal commercial importation or possession of wild animals. One of the big parts of this bill is changing the jurisdiction / venue of fish and wildlife violations. You may not know this, but a fish and wildlife violation is a crime, except for 7 specified minor violations. And that is sometimes a surprise to people who are issued a citation. And in addition, it adds to the load that the criminal division of the Superior Courts must handle. And what sections 4 and 5 are doing is providing that except for big game offenses and under revocation offenses, any fish and wildlife violation that's not otherwise listed in the section, otherwise listed means that they're already minor, shall be charged as a minor violation if the offender has no prior history, no evidence was seized in relation to the violation, a criminal warrant was not used in relation to the violation, and there is no possibility of forfeiture. Your Committee on Judiciary went through this section pretty in a detailed way. Section 6 relates to reptiles and amphibians taking in possession. You may not know this, but there is no restriction on taking of reptiles and amphibians in the state, except if they are threatened and endangered species. So you can go out right now and shoot as many turtles as you want, or collect as many turtles as you want. And this is going to be a incentive for the department to adopt rules for the regulation of that activity. So you will see in sub A, a person shall not intentionally take a reptile or amphibian in the state unless authorized by the rules. That prohibition doesn't go into effect until 2027. So the department has 18 months to adopt rules that you will see that they're authorized to adopt, not required, on page 6, lines 5 and 6. They may establish requirements for the following by rule: collection or possession for commercial use, export or sale, taking of reptiles or amphibians that are common, widespread, and abundant with stable or increasing population. So there might be authorized hunting of those species. The taking of a reptile or amphibian that due to population risk to other native species has been identified as.
I think you're going a little too deep in the weeds here.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Got it. Section 7 largely bans the import, possession, and sale of the pond slider. Does everyone know what the pond slider is?
I do not.
It's a turtle that's native to Virginia, and it is aggressive, and it is basically forcing out native species. And so a person shall not import, possess, or sell in the state of pond slider.
Nice coloring.
Yeah, some of them have red ears, some of them don't. But they would be prohibited from import, possession, or sale until the commissioner adopted rules to address their regulation.
Okay.
Then page 8, this is amending the existing transport, importation, possession, and stocking of animals to include reptiles and amphibians, and on page 19 to allow the commissioner to adopt rules regarding collection, possession, sale, or import of wild animals for commercial purposes. And then section 9, this amends the prohibited acts under the Threatened and Endangered Species Act, the State Threatened and Endangered Species Act, to include 3 additional types of prohibited activity: sell or offer for sale in intrastate commerce, a T&E, deliver, receive, carry, transport, or ship a T&E, and intrastate import a threatened T&E into or export a threatened T&E species from Vermont. Section 10 is an amendment to the incidental takings law, which basically just has this provision throughout that it says, except for threatened and endangered species listed by the secretary as basically critical species, there's this language, and so there's notice opportunity. There are some T&E that you don't want people to know where they are. Because then you just incent people to go and try and find them. So when you will see in 5410B, there's this authority of the commissioner to designate those that are not going to be listed and noted, posted in public notice. So that's what this language is referring to, 5410B, except for those that are listed prior to issuing the permit for an incidental take, there will be a notice. But you will see that there's an exception on that in several places. And then you get to this 5410, secretary shall not disclose information regarding specific location of T&E or their habitats.
Great.
And then there's the B, the subset of T&E whose specific names shall not be included in regulatory planning. So normally the town or the owner of land or potential buyer or during a regulatory process, you get the fact that there's T&E on your property or property you're planning for. That won't happen during the regulatory planning process. The owner and the buyer will get that notice. And then section 12, this is also fiscal. Currently, the agency, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, is required to compensate farmers who suffer damage by deer or bear. And they are looking to get rid of that. It's not used that often, but it's used frequently by the same people. And they're looking to step away from this. They limited the amount per year to $5,000. I think it was 2 years ago. But they're just looking to strike it entirely at this point. And then the effective dates, July 1, 2025. And then that future prohibition on the taking of reptiles and amphibians is January 1, 2027, but the commissioner is going to adopt rules prior to that. Or should adopt them prior.
Representative Bobby.
Thank you. So sections 8 and 9, when you were sliding through, I saw it said fee of 100, so we're up there.
Oh, this is when you are applying to import an animal or transport an animal. So you have to get a permit to do that, to bring it into, transport within, transport through, or possess in the state any live, wild bird or animal of any kind. So say you wanted to bring an elephant into the state, you have to get a permit and pay $100 for that permit.
I don't think it's changed from.
Is that current law?
Yeah.
I just, it
Okay.
went sliding by and I just want to
Thank
make
you.
sure.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I haven't had an opportunity to look through it all, but I heard rumors that initially there was talk about banning frogs' legs and using snapping turtles for food. Is that in here anywhere?
No and yes and no, no and yes. So there is the provision in section 6. It doesn't ban them from food. It says a person shall not intentionally take a reptile or amphibian in the state unless authorized by the rules of the commission. And it's just like you can't take deer in the state unless authorized by the rules of the board. And that would not go into prohibition, would not go into effect until January 2027. The commissioner has the ability to adopt rulemaking prior to that, and it's commissioner's rules, it's not board rules. But they would be able to authorize the taking of reptiles or amphibians that are S5, which are the common species, not the threatened or not the stressed, or with stable or increasing populations indicated by data collected or compiled by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Just like the taking of any wildlife under the board rules now has to be supported by Fish and Wildlife.
So do they think there's a, not very big population of bullfrogs or what?
They at one point listed species that could be taken, and it included the green frog. They don't call it the bullfrog, and the snapping turtle, and there was one other I can't remember. But they thought that this was a better way to go, to not trying to specify the specific species, but allowing them when they're S5 commonly populated in the state, for them to allow for that.
Well, again, I guess my concern is, remember I told you that the Cajun Snack Shop.
I'm excited to go through this. Oh, that's right.
Frog legs. So I just worry, I don't know where they get the frog legs, I know where they get the alligator, it's not Vermont, so.
You can get frog legs from Cisco, having worked in a restaurant that served Cisco.
Again, I mean, I, as a kid, used to love to,
Yeah,
pull frogs and eat frog.
and most likely that's not gonna change, right? You're just going to have a rule where the commissioner is gonna say that these are the species that are available for taking. The snapping turtle was definitely a species of debate. They live for 80 to 90 years.
Really?
Yes. And they bioaccumulate a ton of just toxins and chemicals. And it's apparently not good to eat them. My dad loved eating them. But I might explain. But you're not, there was testimony from one of the very respected herpologists in the state that you shouldn't be eating. And then there's the question of, are they a stable population? How do you even know? They don't start breeding until they're like 25 years old.
So I think maybe what we could do is hear from JFO about it, and we could let the bill sit overnight with us while people can read more thoroughly on their own.
And if I can, one last comment is, so this last piece really affects agriculture. And I'm just wondering whether or not Ag Committee had any oversight or bypass in regards to. this.
Not that I recall.
Thanks.
Last fall in the news, they caught a woman with a duffel bag full of turtles. Is this coming from that?
No, I mean,
Maybe they've been working on this.
part of it is the commercial, the department really wants to put some regulatory control on people that are collecting for commercial use. That are people that are just collecting them to sell them as pets. People collecting turtles for their shells. And they want to have some authority over that.
And it doesn't affect the Connecticut River. Is that because the river all belongs to New Hampshire?
Yeah, the boundary line is,
It's on our side.
yeah, there's these stone pillars that run all up the Connecticut.
Lake Champlain Invitational Father's Day fishing tournament.
Yeah, they would pay the $100 fee.
That's different from our,
Yeah.
Canadian one. Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Ready? Thank you.
James Duffy, Joint Fiscal Office.
Thanks for being here late in the afternoon.
Happy to be here. We have a fiscal one prepared for H230. I will share it on the screen behind me. In drafting this fiscal note, JFO was in touch with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and ultimately found that the various fiscal components of the bill are expected to be de minimis on both the overall state budget and the Department of Fish and Wildlife's state budget or agency budget. I'll just run through each section with fiscal impacts here and we can discuss them in turn. So section 2 would make a change to how fishing tournament permit fees are assessed by the department. Currently, there's a flat fee of $50 for any fishing tournament that takes place in the state. Under H230, that would change to a tiered permit scale ranging from $10 through $100. Additionally, it would require that if you're holding a multi-day fishing tournament under one permit, that tournament has to happen on consecutive days. You can't have a permit tournament in June, July, and August and conduct all of those under one permit. And this would eliminate a sort of loophole that's been used in the past for fishing tournament permit fees. So that being said, the Department of Fish and Wildlife anticipates no significant effect on their agency permit fee collections from this. On the one hand, the permit fee for small tournaments would go down from the existing baseline, but a loophole that enables, multiple tournaments across one season would also be closed. Just for a sense of scale here, fishing tournament permit fees annually generate about $6,000 in permit fee revenue for the department. And so it's a de minimis amount of money relative to the department's overall budget. Sections 3 through 5 of the bill would amend various Fish and Wildlife enforcement provisions. So Section 3 ups the maximum fine that can be assessed for big game violations. So the range is going from $400 to $1,000 to $500 to $2,000 for first violations. And then subsequent violations have an increased maximum fine of $5,000 up from $4,000. So JFO does not forecast revenue from fines and penalties, but we did talk to the department about the expected fiscal impact of this. It can't be predicted. It depends on the number of violations issued by wardens in future years. Also, courts have discretion about what the amount of a fine is within their own statutory parameters. But we can say that this bill won't change where the money goes. No matter, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself to sections 4 and 5. What I wanted to say about this section is that if you assume that we have the same number of big game violations next year that we did the last, and all of them are assessed the new maximum fee or fine rather, you'd be looking at a $100,000 increase in penalties. In Crazy Land, where you have a bunch of subsequent offenses in one future year. And that's less than 1% of the annual appropriation to the department from the Fish and Wildlife Fund. And I'll just note that these fines are split between the general fund and the Fish and Wildlife Fund. So first they go to the Fish and Wildlife Fund. A warden will assess how much that money stays within the Fish and Wildlife Fund, and then whatever's left over flows to the general fund.
And strangely enough, we do not have jurisdiction over fines here in Ways and Means.
Yes.
So does that mean we wouldn't report this part of the bill, even if asked a question, just?
Sure.
Section 4 and 5, our general counsel or legislative counsel went through this already. This reclassifies a variety of offenses as minor instead of criminal. In discussing this with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, they're not expecting any major fiscal impacts. The jurisdiction for these offenses would change from the criminal court system to the Judicial Bureau. They would be treated as kind of quasi-civil offenses, but that doesn't change where the money ends up. And DFW also expects that the Judicial Bureau would probably follow the criminal fines schedule that's already followed. So they aren't expecting a change in the revenue that flows to the state from these fines. And these fines follow the same kind of split as the big game violations. They go to the Fish and Wildlife Fund first, and anything left over goes to the general fund at the discretion of DFW enforcement staff. So that is fines. And finally, Section 12 of the bill would repeal a program that's currently in place at the Department of Fish and Wildlife, where farmers can apply for reimbursement up to $5,000 per year for certain crop damages caused by deer or bear. In order to be eligible for this, their land can't be posted against deer or bear hunting, but assuming your land is not posted against that, you're eligible to apply for up to $5,000 per year. This provision would eliminate that program. And so future expenditures to the state for farmer reimbursements for this damage would be prevented future years. JFO can't estimate what the potential savings to the state might be. It depends on the value and number of future claims filed. But just again, to give a sense of scale here, from fiscal year 22 through 24, DFW reimbursed 4 farmers for a total of approximately $207,000. Of that 207,000, 200 would no longer be eligible because there is a new cap of $5,000 per year on these claims. And so under the current kind of status quo, you're looking at an average of about $4,400 per year, going from DFW's base budget to these farmer reimbursements.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Is there a threshold for what JFO considers de minimis?
I'm not aware of an exact threshold, Representative. There may in fact be one. My sense is that it's kind of a judgment call. But in this case, all of the amounts that we're referencing are less than 1% of one appropriation source for the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
I think it's usually a question of scale, so something de minimis to the edge
Yeah.
fund might not be de minimis to.
Yeah.
Special
I
fund.
was just curious
right?
how about that. If they can be charged.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Folks, what I'd like to do is hold this overnight and plan to vote tomorrow at 9. We have, as we heard, like very limited jurisdiction over the bill, but I want to give people time to read the rest of the bill and figure out how they feel about it. But I don't think we need to take any further testimony on it. And with that, we are finished and I'll see you at 9.
What was the vote? Environment Committee.
911.
911.
Thanks.
Thanks, Teddy.